Explore 5 haunting stories of unimaginable tragedy, where tight spaces became death traps and even final resting places. These tales of claustrophobic deaths will leave you breathless, questioning how such tragedies could happen. Join us as we uncover the chilling details of lives lost in confined spaces. It was March 22, 1959, and Neil Moss, an undergraduate philosophy student from Oxford University, was exploring the depths of Peak Cavern in Derbyshire, England. But what began as an exciting exploration of unknown subterranean passages quickly became a harrowing tragedy that would shock an entire community. At 20, Oscar Hackett Neil Moss was an undergraduate at Balliol College, Oxford. He was an avid sportsman and an explorer at heart. Neil, the son of a British cotton executive, had a passion for discovery, ultimately drawing him to the exhilarating but dangerous caving world. On Sunday, March 22, 1959, Neil Moss and a group from the British Speleological Association entered Peak Cavern. They wanted to explore a newly discovered tunnel in stalagmite chamber, located 1,000 feet beneath the surface. Peak Cavern is one of Britain's most famous cave systems. Its cavernous entrance looms over the village of Castleton. The cave is known for its intricate network of narrow passages and vertical shafts. As such, the cave was both a marvel and a menace to those who dared to navigate its depths. Neil Moss and 7 others sought to map a challenging passage uncovered only 2 weeks earlier. The young undergraduate, slim and 6 feet tall, took the lead as the team descended into the chamber. He wriggled through a narrow corkscrew-shaped shaft. The descent was full of obstacles. The shaft dipped vertically for 12 feet, twisted sharply, and continued through a constricted inclined passage before dropping another 18 feet. Neil Moss decided to undertake a difficult task on his own. He descended alone, kicking the ladder ahead to clear the way. However, as he maneuvered to dislodge boulders obstructing the shaft, the ladder became jammed beneath him. Realizing his dangerous position, he attempted to climb out, but his height and the narrow confines of the shaft left him immobilized. He reportedly called out to his friends, saying that he was stuck and couldn't budge an inch. His companions initially believed they could rescue him with ropes, but they were wrong. Attempts to haul Moss out with ropes failed repeatedly as the ropes frayed and snapped under the strain. Meanwhile, the air within the shaft grew increasingly toxic since Neil's position obstructed ventilation and carbon dioxide began to accumulate. Disorientation set in, and his responses became erratic. His breathing grew labored as the atmosphere deteriorated further. His rescuers, too, began to succumb to the poisonous air. 3 passed out while attempting to reach him. As news of the ordeal spread, volunteers from across England, including members of the Royal Air Force and caving experts, rushed to assist. Among them was 18-year-old June Bailey, an experienced petite caver. June spent hours trying to rescue Neil, but the foul air forced her to retreat despite her bravery. The rescue team pumped oxygen into the shaft in a desperate bid to revive Moss, but the mud-slicked walls and the unforgiving geometry of the passage thwarted each attempt to extract him. As hours turned to days, hope waned. By the morning of 24th March, Moss had fallen silent. An RAF doctor declared him dead, though no one could confirm the exact time of death. His father, Eric Moss, who had kept vigil at the cave entrance throughout the ordeal, made the gut-wrenching decision to leave his son's body in place. Removing it, he believed, would only endanger the rescuers' lives. The lower shaft was sealed with loose rocks in the aftermath, and a simple inscription was placed nearby. The chamber where Moss died was renamed Moss Chamber in his memory. Media coverage of the tragedy spanned continents, with reports in Europe, Australia, and America capturing the harrowing details. Today, Moss Chamber remains sealed, a silent monument to a young explorer whose pursuit of discovery came at the ultimate cost. On January 13, 2019, a tranquil family picnic in the rolling hills of Totolan, Malaga, became an unimaginable nightmare that would grip Spain and the world for nearly 2 weeks. 2-year-old Julen Rosello, curious and full of life, disappeared in a way no one could have foreseen, sparking one of the most heartbreaking rescue missions in modern history. Julian was the youngest child of Jose and Vicky, a family from Malaga who had already endured profound loss. Just 2 years earlier, they had buried their 3-year-old son, Oliver, who succumbed to a congenital heart defect. That Sunday, January 13, 2019, the family spent a peaceful afternoon on a relative's property. Julian wandered off as the adults prepared food and took care of small tasks. Within moments, he fell into an illegally excavated borehole, a narrow shaft just 9.8 inches wide and over 328 feet deep. Jose heard his son cry out and ran to the hole. Just as he realized how deep the hole was, the loose soil at the mouth of the borehole crumbled, sealing off the shaft. Julian's voice went silent. Nearby hikers, alerted by the family's panicked screams, called emergency services. A race against time followed as rescuers arrived and began locating and retrieving the little boy. The borehole was a feeble structure, drilled without authorization just a month prior by a property owner searching for groundwater. It had been left unsecured. It was a trap for anything or anyone small enough to fall in. Rescue teams quickly determined that reaching Julian would be extraordinarily difficult. The narrow shaft was blocked by compacted soil at a depth of 232 feet, likely dislodged during Julian's fall. Traditional methods of retrieval were impossible. Over 300 experts, including elite miners, firefighters, and engineers, worked together for 2 weeks to devise a solution. Their plan involved drilling a parallel vertical shaft, followed by a horizontal tunnel to reach the spot where Julian was believed to be trapped. It was a massive task that required the mobilization of massive machinery and meticulous coordination as the terrain's rocky composition slowed progress. But the life of a little boy was at stake. 2 broken-hearted parents were waiting for a miracle. They remained at the scene day and night, sleeping in a tent. Drilling was painstakingly slow as workers encountered layers of unforgiving rock. Explosives were used to break through, and a specially designed rescue capsule was constructed to allow miners to navigate the final stretch. As the days passed, the psychological and emotional toll on all involved was immense. Offers of assistance poured in from around the globe, including expertise from engineers who had aided in the rescue of trapped Chilean miners years earlier. Despite the monumental effort, the outcome was not what anyone had prayed for. In the early hours of January 26th, after 13 days of relentless work, rescuers reached Julian. The little boy was found lifeless at a depth of 71 meters. An autopsy later revealed he had died almost instantly from severe head trauma sustained during the fall. His parents' worst fears were confirmed, and their already broken hearts bore an unimaginable new weight. Julian's death prompted a national outpouring of grief and reflection. Tributes to the boy and the rescuers who spent hours fighting to save him flooded social media. Unfortunately, the story wasn't over. Questions loomed about how this tragedy could have been prevented. The borehole's illegal excavation and inadequate safety measures became the focus of an investigation. The property owner claimed he had covered the hole with rocks, but this did little to ease the family's pain or absolve the negligence that had cost a young life. It was a cold November evening in 2009 when Larry Ely Murillo Moncada vanished into the frigid Iowa night, leaving his family and the community in anguish. For a decade, his fate remained a mystery, shrouded in despair and unanswered questions, until a grim discovery in 2019 revealed the heartbreaking and extremely unusual circumstances of his death. Larry, a 25-year-old supermarket worker from Council Bluffs, Iowa, was a man grappling with personal struggles. On the evening of his disappearance, Larry was reportedly barefoot and disoriented, fleeing his family home during a snowstorm after an argument with his parents. His parents alerted the authorities, telling them Larry was hallucinating, a condition possibly exacerbated by antidepressant medication he had been taking. They recounted his confusion and erratic behavior, as well as his belief that eating sugar would slow his racing heart. Moments after running out into the storm, he was gone, never to be seen again. The search for Larry began immediately. His desperate and heartbroken parents alerted authorities and scoured the area, hoping for any sign of their son. The night's weather was severe, with icy winds and snow blanketing the streets. Larry had no shoes, keys, or vehicle, and the conditions seemed impossible to survive. Despite the efforts of family, friends, and law enforcement, no trace of him was found. As his father later declared, it was as though the earth had swallowed him whole. Years passed without answers. Then, in January 2019, a contracting crew dismantling equipment in the closed no-frills supermarket where Larry had worked made a shocking discovery. Wedged in an 18-inch gap behind the store's refrigeration units, they found human remains. The body, which the cold had preserved, was identified through DNA as Larry's. The mystery of his disappearance had finally been solved, but the answers it brought were no less tragic. Investigators pieced together a chilling sequence of events. After leaving his home that snowy night, Larry likely sought refuge in the supermarket where he had once worked. Police believed he climbed onto the coolers. While up there, he likely lost his footing and fell into the narrow gap between the coolers and the wall. The fall, approximately 12 feet, left him trapped upside down in a space too tight to escape. The supermarket's loud refrigeration units likely drowned out any cries for help. Over the years, employees and shoppers had reported a foul odor near the freezers, but their concerns were dismissed. The smell, which persisted until the store closed in 2016, was the only hint of Larry's tragic fate, hidden just inches from where customers shopped daily. The autopsy revealed no signs of trauma, and his death was ruled accidental. Investigators surmised that Larry succumbed to asphyxiation or hypothermia in the cold, silent confines of the gap. The discovery brought some closure, but also reopened old wounds for his grieving family. For 10 years they had lived with the agony of not knowing, clinging to the hope that he might one day return. Larry's parents were devastated by the revelation. His father described the pain as unbearable, a sorrow made greater by years of unanswered questions. Larry's death underscored the hidden dangers of neglected spaces in workplaces and raised questions about how such an incident could go unnoticed for so long. The gap where he was found was rarely inspected, and the constant noise of the freezers masked the tragedy unfolding behind the walls. While the discovery provided some answers, it could never erase the pain of losing a young man whose life ended so abruptly and tragically. On December 20th, 2019, 14-year-old Harley Dilley left his home in Port Clinton, Ohio, to attend his last day of school before the holiday break. It was a typical winter morning, the air crisp and cold, but Harley never made it to school. His sudden disappearance plunged his family and the local community into a frantic search, a devastating mystery that would only be resolved weeks later in the most heartbreaking way. Harley had a strict daily routine, often sticking close to home, and was particular about his habits. Despite his quirks, he was a regular teenager with a life ahead of him. That December morning, Harley was last seen on surveillance footage, wearing a thin maroon puffy jacket, crossing the street outside his house. When Harley did not come home that evening, his family reported him missing. The community rallied in the search effort, with law enforcement, volunteers, and even the FBI scouring over 150 acres of land. Helicopters circled overhead, and K-9 units combed through neighborhoods. Social media campaigns circulated his image while residents checked their home security footage for any trace of the boy. The disappearance of the slight 4'9" teenager touched the hearts of many, sparking an $18,000 reward for information leading to his safe return. Days passed and turned into weeks, and authorities were no closer to finding Harley. They initially considered the possibility of him running away, as he had occasionally stayed out overnight when upset. However, as temperatures dropped and more time passed, concern grew for his safety. The house directly across the street from Harley's home, a summer property under renovation, was initially overlooked during the search, and for good reason. It was locked, with no visible signs of forced entry. Nearly a month after Harley vanished on January 13, 2020, police decided it was better to err on the side of thoroughness. They decided to recanvass the area. This time, they spoke with the summer property owners and gained access to the vacant house. They found evidence that made their hearts sink. Harley's maroon coat and glasses lay on the second floor, near a brick chimney. What they uncovered next confirmed their worst fears. Harley's body was discovered trapped inside the narrow chimney, a space measuring just 9 by 13 inches. Investigators believed he climbed an antenna attached to the house to reach the roof and attempted to lower himself into the chimney. It remained unclear why he chose to enter this way, but evidence suggested he was trapped when he reached a point where the chimney was blocked between the first and second floors. In a desperate attempt to free himself, he pushed his coat and glasses through a flue into the house, but it was no use. Compression asphyxia was determined to be the cause of death. To recover the remains, the chimney had to be dismantled brick by brick. Investigators later noted that decomposition odor had not been detected during earlier searches, likely due to the sealed nature of the chimney and the winter cold. This tragic discovery left the community reeling. Police Chief Robert Hickman, visibly emotional during the press conference, described the incident as a devastating accident. Investigators confirmed no foul play, and the property owners expressed their heartbreak over the tragedy, offering their prayers and support to Harley's grieving family. Harley's death highlighted the fragility of life and the devastating impact of unanswered questions. For weeks, his family had clung to the hope of his safe return, only to face a reality no parent should endure. His sister, in a poignant social media post, mourned the loss of her brother, expressing the deep sorrow shared by a family and community left to grapple with an unimaginable loss. On April 22, 2023, Carl O'Keefe, a devoted father and accomplished climber, joined his children at a birthday party at Kong Adventure Center in Keswick, Cumbria. What began as a joyful day of celebration would unravel into a tragic ordeal that would cost Carl his life, leaving his family reeling from an unthinkable loss. Carl, a 49-year-old from Lancaster, was known for his intellect, passion for science, and advocacy for the neurodiverse community. A devoted father of 3, he spent his weekends with his children, creating memories and sharing his love of exploration. He was applying for a PhD in astrophysics, fascinated by solar storms and the mysteries of the universe. He even adorned his arm with NASA Hubble images as tattoos. Yet, despite his vast interests and experiences, no one could have predicted the tragic accident that would cut his life short. The incident occurred in the indoor caving area of the Kong Adventure Center, a popular venue designed to simulate the challenges of natural caves. Attending the birthday celebration with 4 children, Carl entered the fiberglass caving tunnels, a labyrinth of tight passages. While navigating one of these tunnels, he slipped and became trapped. Despite his experience as a climber, the tunnel's narrow confines and awkward angles left him immobilized. Staff at the center were the first to respond, working tirelessly to free him. Emergency services were called when it became apparent that their efforts alone would not suffice. A massive multi-agency rescue effort followed, involving Keswick Mountain Rescue, Cumbria Ore Mines Rescue Unit, local fire services, paramedics, and the Hazardous Area Response Team. Even visitors to the center assisted by dismantling sections of the climbing wall to gain better access to the hidden tunnels. The rescue operation lasted for 4 grueling hours. Time was of the essence, as Carl's position in the confined space began to take a toll on his health. The tunnel compressed his body, and prolonged immobility led to severe crush injuries. Emergency teams used specialized cutting equipment to widen the space and extract him carefully. Once freed, Carl was rushed to Cumberland Infirmary in Carlisle by ambulance, bypassing the air ambulance that had arrived on the scene. Carl's condition was critical upon arrival at the hospital. Despite the exhaustive efforts of the medical staff, the extent of his injuries became apparent. Over the following days, Carl remained in intensive care, surrounded by family. His sister, Olivia Short, stayed by his side, describing the heartbreak of watching her younger brother fought for his life. On April 30th, 8 days after the accident, Carl passed away. His death was attributed to complications from crush injuries sustained during the incident. The tragedy left Carl's family and the broader community in deep mourning. Olivia spoke of her brother as her sibling and her closest friend, with whom she shared daily conversations, word challenges, and a shared curiosity about the natural world. Carl's children now face a future without the devoted father who had been a constant source of love and inspiration. The incident also prompted questions about safety at the Kong Adventure Center. Cumberland Council, the regulating body overseeing the facility, announced an investigation into the circumstances surrounding Carl's death. The Adventure Center expressed condolences, emphasizing that it followed all emergency procedures and worked alongside rescue teams to save Carl. Carl was remembered as a man with a brilliant mind who sought to unravel the mysteries of the cosmos while remaining deeply rooted in the lives of his children and family.